now.
They're going to count it.
Nathaniel, we're gonna talk
1-7.
about, those business interruption cases?
Yeah, we can.
Or
Wait a second, she's gonna log us in. Go ahead. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to all our social media friends with Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for visiting our show each week. Also, YouTube follows. We thank you. Make sure you spread the word. And also, we have again our all-star panel, starting with the famous Milton Grimes, one of the top trial lawyers in America. I also have John Sweeney is outstanding trial lawyer, one of the best in the country, and research analyst and superstar lawyer Vanita Banks. We have our all-star panelists joining me again, as always. Thank you guys for participating. We'll start the show off by first acknowledging something that was historic that happened last Saturday. Last week, for the first time that I've seen in America, we had about 30 or 40 million people in the urban areas went to the street to celebrate. I had never seen anything like that in a democracy. We've seen that type of outpouring of love and affection with the overthrow of communist regime, but never in America. It was just shockingly, and also it was very gratifying at the same time, but people were just happy, they were celebrating. Nobody got in trouble. So thank you, America, for behaving very well. And thank you for all those 80 million people look like that voted for Biden. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Grimes, start with you, sir. Were you one of the people, the well wishers out there last Saturday after the election?
I told you I went to the polls personally to vote on Tuesday for that celebrated feeling. And it was anticlimactic and it was flat. But we did get together on a Zoom celebration Saturday evening, some friends and family members around the country, about 15 of us, I guess it was, and celebrated. But unfortunately, I'm gaining up on John Sweeney in age, so I have to limit my street activities today.
Attorney Sweeney, were you out there, sir?
I was not I was not out there, and not just because of COVID. I've been to my share of marches over the years, and but I celebrated here with family, and I like Milton's family. My family, like Milton's family, did a Zoom session and discussed the issues of the day. But I was very happy to see all the people in New York and other areas, in Los Angeles and across the country celebrating. And I was particularly proud of the people in Atlanta, Georgia. You guys, we expect you to step up in January for the Senate races, but I was very happy. And like you, Nathaniel, I've watched my share of the overthrowing of governments and dictators across the world throughout the years, and this was very similar to one of those spontaneous explosions. You know, a visceral reaction of the, you know, amongst the people. So it was very satisfying. We just it concerned me though that Trump, who's a lame duck president, who just has 70-something days to you know, to wrap up his business and get out, is making all these changes at the top of the military. It signals something very, very sinister to me.
Well, Attorney Banks, two reasons. Did you participate? And also tell us, give us a COVID update of what's going on in your city, the legal system also.
Well, I can tell you that I did not join any of the mass celebrations in Chicago, for example, but I did take a long walk, and I can tell you that I got a good night's sleep for the first time in a long time. I think we all collectively breathed again last Saturday, and I think that the mayor of Paris, that her sentiments reflected, you know, so many people in her tweet where she declared, "Welcome back, America." And so, like my colleagues on this call, I celebrated with my family and friends, and just slept well on Saturday evening. Unfortunately, the news here in Chicago with respect to COVID, or here in Illinois, is dismal. I mean, we're at a crisis level here, and cases are skyrocketing, not only across Illinois, but across our nation. We've seen cases in all the states. They're continuing to escalate. We're seeing a strain on hospitals. We're seeing a strain on the staff shortages. Here in Illinois, there's over 500,000 cases, and there's been over 10,000 deaths. And Governor Pritzker has warned, as well as Mayor Lightfoot, that we're on the verge of another shutdown. So unfortunately, we may be in a situation, if we don't get this under control quickly, of going back and losing all the gains that we might have made since March. And so beginning Monday, we're being advised to stay at home for the next 30 days. It's not a formal shutdown, but it could lead to that. And to only leave home for work, school, and other essential needs. And so the public officials are begging people to do just a simple thing: wear your mask. And we heard from the CDC, I believe, this week, that masks not only protect you from others, but it protects you as well. Another reason to wear a mask. And I also read that if individuals would just wear masks, that we could save $1 trillion in this nation.
Wow.
It
What
would
he had-
prevent just wearing a mask would prevent economic losses up to $1 trillion. And so we're looking at close to 250,000 deaths. And so this is a time where we know that people are tired of these measures, but we're moving into the holidays, and it's anticipated that cases will continue to skyrocket as a result of social gatherings during the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays.
Let me tell you, if just had the Trump administration just taken this seriously, simple things like wearing a mask became a political statement. If you look at countries like Australia and New Zealand, which are isolated, like America is isolated, or North America, all we had to do was not make this fight against the COVID-19 virus a political issue. I think we could have controlled things like New Zealand and Australia. Understand that it's running roughshod across Europe again because all of those countries lie contiguous to one another, and each country has a border and a different policy. Well, the virus doesn't respect borders or politics; it just sweeps. And the president of New Zealand got it under control so quickly. We could have controlled this so easily. We couldn't have totally eradicated it, but we could have controlled the number of deaths had it not been made a political issue. Just wearing a mask, the president, Mr. Macho Man, decided that it was going to be a political fight or issue, and that it wasn't macho if you wore a mask. And I saw a little cartoon that it turns out that Trump got the full 2020 experience. He caught COVID. He was lost his job and evicted from his house.
That hasn't happened yet, though, John. The eviction part is going to be a theater. I believe it could be. The eviction, the actual removal of him from the house. I don't know how he's going to react to that, but what I see, what I read here in California, Nathaniel, is that the areas, the outlying areas, the hospitals have to close because they can't handle the influx of people, the new infections. And this man has got 70 million people following his lead. And his lead is to celebrate life as we've normally done. I see on TV, they're advertising get-togethers. They're not promoting distancing and masking. People are celebrating. People are joyous. People are hugging at different occasions. And that's in people's mind. And that's what Trump has promoted. So I just my own suspicion and believe that we're going to see this thing is higher now than it has ever been since the virus has been here, right? The infection rate. And we're coming up on Thanksgiving and Christmas. How are we going to keep people separated? You know, we got a serious problem here. And what we do with it, nobody knows.
Well,
And people don't understand that their greatest risk of transmission is family members and people that are close to them. You know, there's this thinking that these are my family members and that, you know, they're in my bubble. But regardless of the relationship, that you can really only be somewhat safe. I'm going to put safe because there's no such thing as total safety here. but you really can't think beyond the people in your immediate household, because other people's family members are not. They're going out, they're going to the store, they're exposing themselves. And so there's this false sense of security I'm hearing among families, that they believe it's okay if they celebrate Thanksgiving or Christmas with family. But people are coming inside more because of the cold. And if you do decide to gather during the holidays, although I would recommend against it, you want to make sure that you've got proper ventilation in your home. You want to make sure that you're socially distanced. You want to make sure that you're wearing your mask. You want to make sure that you're not handling community utensils with respect to your food. So there are things that you can do, but we really can't let our guard down during the holidays. We're seeing there's 65,000 people that are currently hospitalized due to COVID across the nation, and over 5,000 in Illinois alone. And that's just putting an incredible strain on our hospital system, not to mention the fact that people come to hospitals for other types of injuries and diseases. So just an incredible strain on our system, and people aren't able to get care potentially for cancer, diabetes, injuries, falls. And so we're really reaching a crisis situation here in America.
It is, it is.
Well, the one thing that I appreciate your advice on that, and I want all our listeners to know, Attorney Banks made some very salient points that we all must adhere to. 1, always wear your mask. 2, social distance. 3, wash your hands. 4, avoid these large gatherings. On Thursday this week, a good friend of mine, attorney, I called him up, and I called him last week and he didn't call me back, and I did a follow-up phone call. And I learned when I talked to him on Thursday afternoon about 4 o'clock, he had just been released from the hospital. He had COVID-19. And he did all those things. We talked about it, but he could only talk for 5 minutes now because he explained to me what happened. He did social distance, he wore his mask. And the only thing he did different is that he went to a funeral of a friend. And he said he went to the funeral, and it was an actual funeral. There was a bunch of folks there. He said, but I had my mask on, and I was very careful. And that was on a Saturday. On Tuesday, I called a doctor because I got so sick until I had to go to the hospital. So he felt that the only place he went, other than what he'd been doing since January, was this funeral. And I thought about that. And one of the sad things about this disease process is that people have relatives to go to nursing home, to go to hospitals, there's funerals. And with all the folks I've known that have died, regrettably, this year, I've only done funerals by virtual this year. I've decided to avoid attending funerals. It's very sad, but I just thought that based on the evidence I've heard, it seemed like that's one of those gigantic spreaders. I don't know.
Yeah, I attended a funeral of a very good friend, former Los Angeles Dodgers baseball star, Sweet Lou Johnson, and passed on at about age 86, I think he was. But it was, Milton was in Inglewood, out at that Inglewood mortuary, but they have a parking lot. They held the funeral in a parking lot, and it was socially distanced. What I did was I just stood in the very, very back and paid my respects and left. But yeah, indoor funerals, if your friend, Nathaniel, if that was an indoor funeral, I can see where it would have been a problem. If Lou Johnson's funeral was indoors, I would not have gone.
Okay, we have a couple callers on Well, wait a second, we'll wait their call back. Now, in terms of activities, I agree with everything Attorney Banks said in terms of how you limit that, and that's what I've been trying to adhere to on a personal level. But the other thing that we need to talk about, we're a legal talk show. Let's talk about what's going on in the legal community first, and we'll start with Attorney Grimes. What are you doing in terms of your legal community in terms of case management now?
Well, we have the ability to call in on the webinar and appear through Zoom. But there are a couple of judges who are demanding physical appearance of the defendant. And in my case, on the couple of cases that's demanded, I can refer to or do the Zoom, but I got to be there with my client because something may go awry. And 2 weeks ago, I was in court and I spoke to several lawyers who were there also. And I found out the next day that one of those lawyers had gone home, got sick, and tested positive for COVID. And so we don't have a united decision on how to handle the courts in any one area of the county. They're doing it differently in various areas of the county. That's Pomona. And this judge, told me on the phone the last time I did it, I want you and your client in my court, the next appearance. So you're kind of left with your own imposed rules to deal with stuff. I got a case out in San Bernardino. I had to argue with the clerk. I cannot come to court. I will not come to court. Please let the judge know. And she argued with me, said just a moment, got back on the phone, said, that's okay, Mr. Grimes, you can call in. But I had to argue with her about, I will not be there tomorrow because I'm 75 years old. I got an underlying condition. I don't have all of them, but I got 2 of them, and I don't want to expose myself. And I slide off of that to try to satisfy the court in other cases. So it's confusing, Nate. That's what I'm trying to get to. Now, I don't know if Sweeney's experience is different or Vanita's experience or your experience is different, but we do not have a set standard out here in LA County or in Orange County, the neighboring county where I practice.
Well, what I've done out here in Los Angeles also, Milton, you're absolutely right. It varies from court to court, but I have not been inside of a courtroom physically since COVID broke in March. All my appearances have been virtual, and the courts are encouraging you to appear virtually. So that hasn't been a problem. The real issue is, for me, has been how I operated my office, with employees, and we try not to have more than 2 employees in the office at any one time. We have a small office. We don't have scores of lawyers, and so we just have a schedule, and my secretary is the one responsible for scheduling people coming into the office, and it's worked. And I have not seen one client since April face to face. And I've taken in several new cases, but I set up a Zoom session, and being around practicing law for 40 years, you have a reputation, and they don't necessarily want to come and shop around and look at you, and they know who you are, and they want to hire you, or they don't want to hire you. So that's how I've managed it out here. It's been manageable, but I am so anxious to get back to the courtroom that I have an appearance here in Los Angeles next week, and I'm strongly considering making that appearance until, of course, Nathaniel, you told me, you just told the audience that your friend had done everything right and did one thing different, go to that funeral. So strongly reconsidering whether or not I'm going to court next week.
You know, John, I'm gonna just speak to it briefly. In the civil clientele and practice, that's fine. I can do that. I do that. My problem is the criminal cases, because I still have I won't say significant number of criminal cases, but I have a number of criminal cases, probably 7. And if I put myself in the shoes of the client, I know how desperate and lonely it is. I feel I do anyway, behind a number of years of doing this, for a man to be in court or a woman to be standing there before all this power and his attorney is safely at home, you know, and it just leaves me with the bad feeling. And so it's a shared experience. And I know they want somebody there with them because it's a frightening experience. So that's the dilemma that I have in the representation of the criminal clients. That's the problem. That's the problem. In the court, I got a 977B appearance for even felony cases. But like I said, the judge says, no, I want you and your client here. Forget that 977B. That allows the client not to be there in the felony case. But so the judges are not uniform. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Attorney Banks, what's going on in Chicagoland?
Well, I am a corporate attorney, and so I've been working remotely since March. And in the event that we have a need to go in the office for a meeting, for example, an important meeting, then we're required to wear a mask. There's temperatures taken before we're admitted. There's a limitation on the number of employees that can be seated in a room. It's all social distance. And we have staggered days to be in the office. I'm also aware that in many courts across Illinois that legal proceedings are being conducted remotely, and that even some trials are being conducted remotely, and that courts are engaging in remote appearances. And while there may not be uniformity, it seems that many courts in Illinois have adapted to a remote process at this time. What are you seeing in Indiana, Nate?
Well, what has happened here is that our Supreme Court has been very proactive because our Chief Justice has tested positive at one point. So here's what has occurred here. Number one, we have different judges doing, in the civil side, doing things remotely as a general rule. And for the most part, up until Friday of this week, it didn't cost me anything. On Friday, I had an unusual experience. One judge required everybody to appear by court calls. Now, a court call costs about $50 to do a phone conversation, which I didn't understand. I'm thinking, we've been doing Zoom and WebEx, and it's been free. You see the judge, you see the parties, and court calls is a phone call. And so apparently this judge decided to do this service, which costs about $50, which is a complete waste of money. But, but here's what has occurred locally. All civil cases, for the most part, have been vacated, and our cases were reset for 2021. However, we've had a significant surge in COVID infectious process, so I'm not sure what's going to happen in early 2021, because as you know, the disease is running out of control as we speak today. But the net result is this current pandemic really hurt victims that's filing civil lawsuits now, because what occurs is that people still have to pay their bills every day, and the people that have significant injuries or death, they need the revenue to survive. They lose a loved one, and they don't have any ability now to go to court to get legal redress, because now the typical case has been put off about 18 to 24 months.
Yeah.
This is a frightening experience for a plaintiff trial lawyer because your clients, of course, is dependent on you to get a quick resolution. And as a lawyer, you're stuck in neutral. No matter what you do, you can't move the case forward because they're not giving you trial date. And so even when you get trial date, they're vacating them. And so it's somewhat frustrating, but that's the card that we dealt with. And so what we've been doing, it given the defense a big advantage currently. What happens is that in order to placate the clients a lot of time, you have to sometime bite the bullet and take 80% of the value of cases. The defense lawyer know that most folks are not going to wait another 18 months. And so even when you file lawsuits right away, it doesn't matter. So right now, whereas we used to set cases out between 9 to 18 months, we're talking about now 21 to 36 months of litigation on simple cases. So if you're in litigation now, you got to be a little bit more patient. And remember, they're not doing jury trial, but they're doing the criminal jury trial locally, but they only do one per week. Now, the reason that's important, Indianapolis, Indiana is 40% of the litigation in the state of Indiana, and we're doing one jury trial per week, folks. And on the other hand, though, it's a pandemic. You know, we're trying to protect the public. And if you have this mass gathering of folks, people get sick, that's not justice, that's just foolishness. So we're stuck with this pandemic. We had an irresponsible response by the government, our federal government, and the net result, we're stuck with this pandemic and all these deaths and sickness every day.
Let me tell you, Nathaniel, that's one thing that sticks in my craw. This irresponsible, incompetent response by the federal government that killed people both in red and blue states, Democrats and Republicans. Yet the guy gets 70 million votes. It's beyond me. It's absolutely beyond me. It just boggles my mind, and it really confirms what most African Americans knew all along. The country has really not changed.
Let me say, can I say this one thing quickly? I heard not recently, some time ago when this thing first jumped off, that Iran released 50,000 prisoners because the court system wasn't going to deal with the judicial aspect of their life during this pandemic. Now, I don't know what they've done since then. I haven't followed up, but that was an act by them. We here in the United States hold on to and maintain this incarceration and the filling of our prisons damn near without change. 2 months ago, the epidemic, the infection rate at Terminal Island amongst 1,100 inmates was 70%. The infection rate at the other federal facility here, and I just can't think of the name of it now, about 100 miles north of me, was 80%. Lompoc. Thank you, John. Was 70 or 80%. That is 800 or 900 inmates out of 11 or 1,200 were infected. They weren't offering them any treatment of any significance or any help. Now, the results, I don't know yet, but I know at that time they exposed that's what was happening. They are still locking up young men and women, mostly brown and black, and they're still putting them in these infectious situations in these prisons. The families are still visiting them, I assume, unless they are in quarantine. They put them in quarantine for 2 weeks, some of them who are showing symptoms. But for some reason, our government has not approached a significant area of infection in this country. That's just one, and I'm sure we can name others. But for some reason, our government hasn't addressed this disease in the fashion that a lot of people simply see it at the beginning that needs to be addressed. So what's wrong with us?
Well, next Saturday, we need to attack this system. That is that we need to look at the civil liability of people that have been incarcerated, nursing home and otherwise, because it raised an interesting legal situation because they have to contract the virus while they're incarcerated or in a nursing home. So we have to discuss that next week in terms of legal liability. But I want to pivot slightly. Nationally, as you know, the center of our universe now shift to the state of Georgia. We found out that President-elect Biden won Georgia by over 14,000 votes. And they did something unique. They said that we're not going to trust the machine. We want to do a hand count, which was, I thought, a little bit bizarre, because I don't know how in the world that a human element is more accurate than the machine. Machine can't lie. Humans can make mistakes. I don't believe machines can make any mistakes. But here's the issue. There are going to be 2 senators elected in Georgia come the first week of January. These 2 senatorial votes represent the second biggest vote of our political life. That is that the control of the Senate is in the hand of Georgia's voters. And I trust those folks because they delivered and made it a purple state this year. And so now we got a process that will, one of the senators said, that will cost $500 million. It was something, I thought, a gross exaggeration, but they started spending $1 million a day in negative ads already on the Democrats. So it's going to be an uphill battle to make sure they get the votes out. But there was something that was educational on my part. Georgia has 16 electoral votes, the same as Michigan. Michigan had like over 1.1 million more voters than Georgia, and they get the same amount, which tells me Georgia is 1/3 African American. So I did the math, and that told me that there's probably another 400 to 500,000 African Americans in Georgia that are not registered to vote. What are your thoughts, gentlemen and ladies?
Well,
How do we fix that?
yeah, I find some way in Georgia to get those 500,000 African Americans who aren't registered. It's as simple as that. and we have 2 months to do it. I don't know, how it breaks down county to county in Georgia, but I imagine there are a lot of rural counties and a lot of counties where African Americans live outside of Atlanta and Macon and Savannah and some of the other metropolitan areas that you're just going to have to get to, figure out a way to reach those people and get them registered. Because
by the way,
right.
that's December 5th is the registration cutoff date, and January 5th is the voting date. So really, there's only about 2.5 weeks to get people registered.
I'm sorry, when is the cutoff?
December 5th, 30 days before
December
the election.
7th.
Is it December 7th or the 5th?
Voter registration ends December 7th.
Okay, thank you.
My research. And as you stated, the runoff is scheduled for January 5th, 2021. And absentee ballots will start to be mailed out on November 18th. So those are very critical dates, as well as in-person early voting begins on December 14th. So the critical dates are November 18th, December 7th, when voter registration ends, December 14th, in-person early voting begins, and January 5th, which is the actual runoff. We know that Stacey Abrams, and we owe her a great deal of gratitude. She and her Fair Fight initiative registered over 800,000 voters for this last campaign. And so I full well anticipate that Stacey and other organizations, including the coalition that came together for our national campaign, will and has already began to mobilize and organize and educate voters in Georgia about the importance of those 2 Senate seats. As you know, no Senate candidate in those 2 races got 50% of the vote, and the balance of power in the Senate is definitely at stake. So from my perspective, all roads lead to Georgia, and so we need to all focus our efforts there and get to Georgia, whether by midnight train or airplane or magic carpet. But Georgia is on our minds and will be on our minds every single day until January 5th.
How about Nathaniel imploring some of the celebrities in Georgia to get public service announcements out there to the African American community? I'm just thinking of a few right now that I know. Tyler Perry, extremely popular down there. Hank Aaron, extremely popular, and the Martin Luther King Jr. family, and so on and so on, and just get television ads out there using those celebrities and well-known people, and just reach every African American household through the local African American newspaper, if that's popular down there. Radio shows like yours, Nathaniel, that are originate in Georgia. It can be done. It can be done.
What's your suggestion, Milton?
Well, what John said is a good idea, everything he said, but they only have 2 weeks, right?
Right.
That's a lot of work to be done in 2 weeks.
But it can be done. It definitely can be done.
Yeah,
I've been on several calls already, both trying to help to raise funds, and I know you as well, Nathaniel.
That's good. Let's take one caller on the line, producer. We'll go to the line real quickly, take a caller. Caller, you have a question for us today?
Oh, good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. Real quickly, Nate, I found the YouTube thing to Milton Grimes. YouTube.
Could you speak up a little bit more, sir?
Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
A little.
Nate?
A little better.
Oh, okay. Well, at any rate, Joe Biden needs to go down to Georgia and make an impassioned plea to get some of those white voters and libertarians to cross over and vote for him. You know, the South has a horrible time with maintaining hospitals in rural counties, and the Republicans are lying to those people. He's the big celebrity that needs to go down there and tell them and ask them folks to cross over and vote for him, and tell him and just try to get some of those white voters to come over and vote for him. The other thing is, Nate, are we going to deal with Donald Trump for the next 4 years? Somebody needs to read this guy the Riot Act and let him know that we're not going to put up with this disruption for the next 4 years. If that means he has to get prosecuted for some of the things that he's done while in office, so be it. But Joe shouldn't put up with this guy for the next 4 years. I want to thank you for taking my call.
Well, I think we would be dreaming if we think he's going to go away. My feelings about this man and what he has shown us he will do, regardless of what the rules are, he's going to do what he wants to do. And I don't see him wanting to go sit down quietly like Obama did in the next 4 years, personally.
I didn't hear all of his comments, but I think that we have a diverse group of folks in Georgia that voted for President-elect Biden. It was a strong turnout of African American, but you had the younger folks who really made a difference, the people that are less than 25 years of age, who are both of all races, really did very well. Now, I was watching the Georgia Report this morning, and I learned that there's going to be about 20,000 folks who are eligible to vote by January that are teenagers. And that was a shocking number to me, that did not vote in this last election, who will be turning age 18. I say 20,000, but it was 17,000. I thought it was an incredible number. And so they're trying to get these young folks who are trending about 75% Democrat registered to vote in the next election, which is a challenge. And so that would result in a collaboration between your high schools and things like that, particularly in the urban areas. We did a program like that here in Indianapolis, where when Obama ran for office, all the high schools did voter registration. It was very successful because President Obama won Indiana in 2008. And that was very significant because we had these teenagers that actually voted. And that's going to be one of the challenges in Georgia. We got to get the teenagers, because it's going to be a close election, probably going to be no more than 20 to 25,000 separation, just like the presidential election. And also, one of the historical facts I was listening to is that the Democrats traditionally in Georgia did not turn out at the same level for the runoff election they did for the first election. So the first challenge is to get the folks, over 2 million people that voted in the general election, to vote in the supplemental election, which is going to be a challenge. Because as you notice, we watched the folks, for example, who stood in line for many hours in the sun waiting to vote. I was so proud of those Americans that was doing that, and I was happy to see them doing that. But that was mass voter suppression in my mind. I'm thinking, why in the urban areas, why in Fulton County and DeKalb County and those counties involving high density of African Americans, why do they have those long lines? I didn't see them in the counties that were rural and Republican. And so I thought that the solution would be, when you do early voting sites, that what's wrong with having 20 voting sites instead of one major site? Another thing too, one general observation about this election. One of the reasons I felt that the big reason we had Trump in the pandemic, but the second reason is that in this election, for the first time in American history, they made it easier for people to vote. On all those states that it made a difference, the Democrat vote was by mail. And we watch a lesson in American history that happened in Pennsylvania. You know, it was so much of a telltale sign of the difference in mail-in votes versus in-person vote. We saw the president run out on an election day to a 600,000 vote lead, and he started celebrating. Unbeknownst to him, that about 80% of the 2 million plus mail-in votes were Democrats.
Well, you say unbeknownst to him, he knew exactly what he was doing. I submit to you, Nathaniel. He said that he was going to do this months and months before. He knew that Democrats and Biden and Kamala suggested voting early by mail, to guard against contracting coronavirus. And Trump suggested to his people, or ordered his Kool-Aid drinking constituents, to vote in person that morning. And then that evening, he knew that the in-person votes were going to be counted first, and that he was going to surge to this lead and then declare victory. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that that the mail-in ballots would be counted last in most places, and that's why he did what he did, and that was the basis of his what he was doing. And by the way, I read in the paper this morning that Roger Stone, the political dirty trickster from the Nixon era, was behind this this disinformation that was spread around about fraud in the elections and this whole thing. I'm proud of the American people, though. We didn't fall for this. We didn't fall for this Russian interference and disinformation on the internet. We didn't fall for this voter suppression. We got out, we stood in long lines, we voted early, and we overcame this evil that was trying to take a foothold in our country, and we really saved democracy. We did. Black people and like-minded people, mostly African Americans, saved this democracy.
Okay, let me respond to one of the legal questions. We have several legal questions that have been posed, and while we were speaking today, the number one trending legal question coming through our various social media is vaccine. Will that impose legal liability if people have symptoms or secondary illness caused by the vaccine? Let me tell you the answer to that. It's pretty simple. FDA approval of vaccine gives them a certain modicum of protection. The vaccine, when they produce it, they have warnings. In the warning, they set forth all the adverse consequences. So as a lawyer, we do proxy liability cases. We sue manufacturers, but we sue them on advertisement liability. So they may give you 10 things that the vaccine may cause and not number 11, and you get number 11, so we sue for number 11, but we can't sue for number 10. So if you are advised of an adverse consequence of a product, any product, see, every product that you take, no matter how simple, it has some inherent risk, and they will warn you. So we can only sue for the things that they don't warn you about. That's very important you understand that. So what I had planned to do is that myself, I was gonna wait until the first batch of vaccines are taken by about 100 million folks. Then I want to see how many people get sick and die. And then after that, we'll file lawsuits. And then by the time the third batch come out, and that's when I'll probably take the vaccine. That's my strategy.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. There's no way I'm going to be a guinea pig and be in the first batch. I'll socially distance, doing what I've been doing, and watch what happens.
Oh, come on, John, let's go take the shot.
What's that?
I'm teasing you. I said, let's go take the shot.
No way, no way, no way, Milton.
Okay, closing comments, starting with Attorney Banks today. The thoughts of the day, Attorney Banks.
Well, my thought is that we definitely have to, over the next 2 weeks, focus on Georgia. Those two Senate races are pivotal to the control of the Senate and the ability of the Biden-Harris administration to really advance a progressive agenda. Of course, if the Senate is lost, but I don't even want to think that, we're going to claim those two races. Of course, President-elect Biden will have the power of issuing executive orders, and he's already indicated his intentions regarding some issues, but it would be really great and a mandate for change if we saw those two Senate races won by Democrats in Georgia.
Okay, Attorney Grimes, closing
You know,
statement.
I remember an old saying, and I don't know if it's a correct saying or not, attributed to Elijah Muhammad, was he just wants the black man to wake up. You don't have to get out of bed, just wake up. And I think we have awoken, but we cannot go back to sleep because, and we got to get out of bed, which means get out here and get the work done. Because some people say, well, we won the war, we won the election, but this battle is not over. This was one battle, getting elected. This man, meaning Mr. Trump, has created a monster that we have to deal with. And we can't just ignore him now that we have a new president. So I say we have to continue the pressure. We have to continue to fight. So come on, black folks, let's do it.
Attorney Sweeney.
Yes, I just want Black America to pat themselves on the back because what we did in protecting democracy, we saved ourselves of untold misery, and perhaps we saved tens of thousands of African American lives. I don't know what this guy's plan was, Trump, had he gotten back in for 4 years. And I know that would have been deleterious to the African American community. I just feel it. You know, you don't have to see things, you know, when you've been alive long enough, you just feel these things. So pat yourselves on the back and let's get to work in Georgia. And that same effort that we put forth in voting and getting the vote out, I think we need to harness that energy to do something with the trillions of dollars a year that African Americans spend on products and being consumers, and recycling it through the community and figure out some kind of way to empower the Black community. We can do it. We saw in the last week what we can do with a collective effort. Let's do it. We won't need reparations. We can use a lot of help. And by the way, private businesses has raised billions of dollars. We'll talk about that in shows, future shows, that African Americans can tap into. But let's do something with our economic force.
Well, I'd like to thank all of our audience for joining us today. And we're going to try to answer those important questions you raised today that we didn't get to today. And we think it is important to discuss the issue of legal liability relating to COVID, such as people incarcerated in nursing home. We'll discuss that. But one thing I need to clarify, one of the things that's trending is that one of our persons want to know about the Chinese are using an experimental vaccine and report no new cases. Well, let me tell you something, folks. I don't believe any information comes from China or Russia. They're a communist regime, and the result is that people are not allowed to give negative commentary about their country. So I don't know whether or not they're true or not. So I don't believe information comes from Chinese news agency. They're government control. But having said that, I don't believe things come from the White House either, the current administration. So I look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, stay safe, and don't forget, put on your mask. May God bless.